Hi, Nina.
Hi,
Thank you for making some time to answer some questions.
it's my pleasure.
Thank you. You are here in the Netherlands to tell us about your method that you created, the Off By For All method. Could you tell us a little bit about it? What's the theory behind it?
Yeah, we've seen so much that in libraries, museums, theaters, and parks, everyone is grappling to figure out how do we involve communities, especially communities we haven't really involved before. And I think that a lot of organizations, we jump to ideas of what we could do for these communities. Oh, we could create this program for them. We could do this marketing for them. And what we've seen again and again is the most powerful way to be for someone is to be representative of them and co-created by them. So we are doing these trainings and also running an online change network program for organizations that want to learn the methods and build the tools to really become of and by the communities that they want to be for.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. And you're here now for the bootcamp
Yeah.
in the Koninklijke Bibliotheek,
Yeah.
KB, in The Hague. It's a bootcamp for libraries. And the library world is also changing slowly to a place where it's more about communities. I am busy together with some other libraries in the Netherlands to create what we call KennisCloud. It's translating to Knowledge Cloud, and this is kind of a network for communities, for organizations, for people to together work on and discuss on societal issues. What we're trying to, it's a lot about communities, so it's really nice. I see some overlap there with your Off By For All. And for us, it's really about finding communities in our region that have like specific knowledge or specific know-how of things.
Right.
And what we want to do is we want to try and share this knowledge with other people in the region.
Yes.
So
And you want to empower them so that the knowledge is offered by the community and the knowledge is representative of the community. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly, and we want to offer them a space also to organize events for themselves and to share their knowledge. What we try to do is we want to also connect them to people in our network or to organizations in our network that could help them maybe achieve their goals or to, you know, to put to use their knowledge for societal issues.
Great.
So this is the thing that we're working on. So I was hoping that maybe you could share your vision on some issues that we encounter sometimes in working with communities.
Yeah.
Because how did you start to work with communities? What was for you the reason to start there?
Yeah, well, gosh, I've been working with communities for about 15 years in different institutions, but most recently I was the director of a museum that was about to close because we didn't matter enough to enough different communities. And so for us, it really was a matter of survival, of saying, we want this museum to be relevant, to be sustainable, to be able to be successful, and we know that that means we have to invite other people in. And we had this feeling, and based on my background was in co-creation and participation, that the best way to involve them was not to say, oh, this exhibit is for you, but to really get to know them and say, how do art and history live in your life? How do you express creativity? How do you get curious about things? And how could the museum become a place for that? So I think often what we see is organizations are driven to work with communities by some urgency to connect because they know that if they don't connect, they will struggle. I think some organizations also do it because they think, like for a moral reason, like they think it's a nice thing to do. And it is a nice thing to do. I do think it's the right thing to do to involve communities. But I think that sometimes if you only come from a perspective that this would be nice to do, then you don't really feel the pressure to actually change. And I think that real change comes when we don't just think it's the right thing to do, but also we think it's the smart thing to do, the necessary thing to do to be able to change. So in our case, we started just by, asking the question, how do you make art? How do you create? How are you curious? And then based on what people were answering, figuring out what we could do next. And it was never that we were asking, what should the museum do? Instead, we were asking, what matters to you? And then we were trying to figure out, how could we build something in the museum that will relate to what you care about?
and also what do you want to do?
Right,
I think,
absolutely. Yeah.
So there should be some kind of need. I
Right.
think. Yeah.
So, for example, in the case of what you're doing, the question I would have is, yes, people have this knowledge, but why does it matter to them to share the knowledge? And how can you position what you're doing, not just in terms of, it would be nice for this knowledge to get out here, but, oh, I see that you want to spread your work to others, and this could be a platform for that. Or, oh, I see that you care about these values and stories that you think are being lost, and this is a way to share them. And so I think it has to be based on why that other person wants to be involved, not just that we have a good idea that they have some knowledge to share.
Yeah, and then we could offer the space and the network to
Yes.
help them achieve their goals.
Yes,
Exactly.
that's the partner power thing, the idea that when they're successful, we are successful.
Yeah.
Because their desire to participate is based not on whether they're satisfying your goals, but whether they're able to satisfy their own goals.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, and because you have a lot of experience in working with the communities, we sometimes encounter, because you are working with volunteers, basically, so it can be a bit difficult sometimes because you're like the person that's being paid for the work in the big organization, and they're the volunteer just offering their help. That can be a bit difficult sometimes. Do you have any tips for us on how to get this feeling more equal?
Yeah. So two things. One is about really rooting it in their values. What are they willing and excited to show up for, rather than feeling like it's a chore. And then, as you know, with the partner power approach, we always say when you're meeting somebody, you want to know 4 things. What do they value? What are their goals? What challenges are they facing? And what commitments can they make? And particularly with volunteers, you want to know about commitments, because if they say, I'd love to be involved, but I can only come on the weekend, or I'd love to be involved, but I need childcare, or I need transportation, then we have to figure out how we can do that. And then when it comes to balancing the playing field, also sometimes we look for, do we want to change that power balance? So do we want to pay people to participate, And I think that sometimes we feel like it's not nice to pay volunteers, that's not how we do things. But there are some groups, especially when we work with groups who are communities that are very low income, that volunteering may not be even an option, a commitment they can make, but they can make a commitment to something where they'll be compensated for their time.
Yeah, exactly. Or to offer something else. Instead of money is also
right. Something that fits their needs. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've worked with. We've worked with people where we've paid them. We've worked with people where they said, what I want is publicity. We've worked with people where they said, while I'm volunteering, could there be some snacks? So it can be different for different people in terms of how do we demonstrate that we value them, even if they're not paid staff.
Yeah, exactly. And the groups that you are working with, how long is this duration of this contact? Like, do you get in touch with them and then are they like in the museum forever, or is it just a certain time and then maybe you get lost or you go to different sites?
What a good question. Yeah. And I think one of the benefits of not being in a huge city is that when you're in a smaller city or when you're in a village, there's an opportunity to connect with people in many different ways. So, when I was at the museum, we were a city of 65,000 people, 300,000 in the county. So what we would do is we kind of treated it like a relationship, like a friendship, where it's like, okay, now we're very intense and we're seeing each other a lot because we're doing this project. Now that project's over, but you're still part of the family of the organization. We're excited to see you when you come, but we're not expecting either of us to always be at this level of intensity.
And you stay in touch.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think if you are really becoming of and by them and not just for them, then after the project, they are invested and they have a stake in participating continually, not just feeling like the program's over, okay, I'm done with that place now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah, and because sometimes also working with communities can be really time consuming. Yeah. Because they put in a lot of effort and time, so they also expect something back, which I think is really, really, really normal.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips on managing that? this can be hard sometimes.
I think we have to be, I think it's important to acknowledge that it takes time and that, but I would say two things about it. One is that if our goal is to involve communities, then we have to do whatever the right path is to be successful. And I think that a lot of us have avoided doing the time of community organizing because we thought, oh, this isn't what we do. Let's just make a prettier flyer. Let's make booklets. And it's like that also takes time. It's just that that's something we're more comfortable doing than going and really talking to people. So I think it's about really saying, if our goal is here, what are the changes we need to make? What things should we stop doing and what things should we start doing? So for example, one of the things we've often done when working with some communities is empower them to make the marketing materials instead of us. And they may not be as pretty, they may not be as, professional looking, but we're not doing that work, they're doing that work, and that work is then speaking to the communities who we hope will come. So I think it's also about being willing both to say yes to some new things, but to say no or let go of some things. Because I think really especially in libraries, there's a lot of desire to control the whole thing, and we have to be willing to do some letting go.
That's really important. I think it can be hard to let tasks go or to not do stuff anymore. And we like to say, how can you make that a loving act? So how could you hold a funeral for something you used to do that you won't do anymore? Or how can you celebrate that you're letting go of this to make room for that? I think it's a very important thing to do organizationally and personally, just to make sure, am I spending my time in the ways that are going to end up with the results that matter most to me? Exactly.
Yeah.
And for the working with of course, it's logic that you work with the community because you want to involve them in your organization, if it's a library or a theater or a museum. And you want to invite them to your organization and to be in your space. But what about outside of that?
Going to their space,
Or maybe to organize something on a totally different space.
Yes, I think very often the most successful projects are not inside our buildings for two reasons. One is about what you said about power, that when we go somewhere else to a space that is not yours and not mine, then we are coming to it a little more equal. But then also, there are some communities who might say, gosh, there's so much about your building, about your library, that doesn't feel welcoming for me. It's not open at the right time. I feel like I'm being watched. It's too clean and I'm afraid my kid is going to make a mistake or something. And so sometimes those barriers we can overcome. Sometimes it would take us a very long time. And if we were to do the meeting or do the event somewhere else that was a more welcoming home ground for that community, more people will come and it will be more successful. So I think it's very important as well.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, and for the Knowledge Cloud, KennisCloud project, we're also creating an online platform, which is a tool for people to stay involved and share their knowledge. Did you ever try working with an online space as well?
We've done some of that, and obviously now with Of By For All, now we have a very big online program with organizational networks. I think with communities, again, it's like often when we design something new, whether it's an online platform or something physical, we kind of have this fantasy about like, oh, they'll have so much fun making their profile, and then they'll want to come back again and again to add knowledge. And we're thinking about what we want them to do, not what they want to do. So online platforms can be very successful if people feel like there's real value for them. So for example, I know of an organization where they have an incredibly successful Facebook group of their volunteers, and their volunteers are sharing with each other, here's what happened today at the library, I learned this, oh my gosh, watch out for this person, da-da-da-da. It's extremely active, much more active than their regular Facebook page, which is just seen as sort of promotional. And so I think it's about that it feels like that group is of, by, and for the volunteers. It's their space. They're not being told how to use it. They're using it in the ways that give them value in the work that they do.
It's kind of the same. It should be of the community and by the community.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So how can you do that in how you design it and also in how it's used? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great. What do you think about the future of the library? Should every library become a community library?
I don't think so. Well, I don't have an opinion about that. I think that what I think about the future is I think it's interesting that when you go to restaurants, there are a lot of different cues about different kinds of restaurants, right? There's very fancy restaurants and there's very casual restaurants. There's Lebanese restaurants and there's Thai restaurants and there's Mexican restaurants. It's interesting that when you walk into a library, while there are differences, it's not very obvious for the person walking in, oh, this library has a different perspective. They are really about our community versus this library is very transactional. And so I think that one of our goals with Of By For All is that some number of libraries, not all of them, probably a very small number, will say, hey, being centered on communities and on people, that's what we're here to do. That's what we think will be successful. And we're going to put this sticker at our front door that says, we are of, by, and for this community, so that when people walk in, they get a sense that this is a different kind of place, and that maybe they're invited not just to participate in the programs, but really to contribute and to co-create as well.
Yeah, because this is also, it's good that you said that, like, for the public, it's not often clear that we are welcoming to communities to organize our own events. So how can we do this? Of course, you can put a sticker, but they probably not see it. Do you have any tips on that? Like, how can we let the people know?
Well, yeah, and we were just doing a workshop here at the bootcamp about the difference between an ask, an invitation, and an offering. So I would say in this example, having the spaces available to use is sort of an offering. You probably have a flyer about it somewhere. Maybe it's in a rack with a lot of flyers, and you feel like, oh, okay, we put out the information, it's done. But are you inviting? Are you going to a group? You know, are you going to the mosque and saying, hey, if you're looking for spaces to do community events, the library is a great place for you. Are you asking? Are you going to that youth group and saying, what do you need space for? Oh, you need space for your bands to rehearse? Okay, we have some spaces for that. Or, oh, you need spaces to, you know, play video games together, you know, in groups? Okay, we have some spaces for that. Yeah. So I think that we often assume that everybody knows what we offer, and we just put out the flyer and we're done.
And people don't read it. So your advice would be to go out there and actually speak to people.
Get to know people, ask them what they're looking for, invite them to participate, and then find those connections between what they care about and what you're able to do.
Okay. Thank you so much for
your
your time
and
your insights.
Oh, my pleasure.